In the beginning there was darkness. Darkness lived for eons in a rift in time. Suffering in solitude for so long, darkness finally shed a tear. From this tear were born two brothers, Sword and Shield. Sword bragged that he could cut anything to pieces, and to that Shield answered that nothing could ever harm him. And so the two fought. The battle raged for 7 days and 7 nights. Sword cut apart Shield. Shield shattered Sword. The fragments of Sword rained down and formed the sky. The fragments of Shield rained down and formed the earth. The sparks from their battle became the stars, and the 27 jewels that adorned Sword and Shield were turned into the 27 true runes, and so the world began. This is the creation myth, the tale told to describe the beginning of the world, and the creation of the 27 true runes. The 27 true runes have had a profound effect on the history of the Suikoden world. Large-scale wars have been fought over the runes throughout history. It is said that those who bear a true rune will be granted great power, but this power often comes with unforeseen consequences. Unlike regular runes, which are born from the true runes and are chosen by people freely, the true runes are sentient. They choose their own host. They choose their own bearer. They have minds, wills, and desires of their own. Because of this, some true runes are considered to be cursed. Some of these cursed true runes have negative effects on those who bear them, either by draining the life of its bearer or hurting those close to the bearer. Some runes require blood sacrifices to unlock their true power. These runes require its bearer to gain mastery over them before losing their negative effects, before losing their curse. While it is said that those who bear a true rune will gain immortality, it's a little more complicated than that. True runes will grant their bearer agelessness and immunity to disease, but the agelessness affects people differently. Whether that's based on the circumstances of the bearer, or whether it's caused by the rune itself is unknown. Some bearers who obtain their true runes as a child would continue aging normally until they reached maturity, before no longer showing signs of aging, while others remained as children. Adults who gained a true rune showed an immediate halt in aging. Some characters even maintained the benefit of agelessness and kept their youthful appearance even after losing their rune, due to the effects of the rune when it was born. And while true rune bearers are ageless, they can still be killed by physical means. A true rune bearer can also lose their rune if the body part the rune is attached to is severed. True runes whose bearers are killed or mutilated are known to search for a new bearer or seal themselves away until they sense a new worthy bearer. Some true runes are shown to hold loyalty and respect for past bearers they formed a strong bond with, and in such cases, the true rune will even listen to commands from their past bearers, or even their past bearers' children. While true runes generally embed themselves into a person's body, some true runes have chosen to take physical forms, or have chosen to embed themselves in physical objects. There are many mysteries surrounding the true runes, as even when a true rune is divided and split apart, they've been shown to provide the same benefits as when they were whole, although this is not always the case. True runes are also capable of manifesting themselves in the form of creatures or beasts. Of the 27 true runes, only 18 of them are known to us. The other 9 remain a mystery. Let's start things off with the Rune of Life and Death. The Rune of Life and Death, better known as the Soul Eater. The rune appears to represent 2 inevitabilities, life and death. This rune is known to eat the souls of those close to its bearer, and those deaths would cause its bearer much grief. The grief caused by the deaths of the bearer's loved ones is said to be the source of its power, and that this is what gives life to its bearer. Because of this, the Rune of Life and Death was often referred to as the Cursed Rune, with the seer Leknot cautioning against its use and insisting that its power must never be used. Leknot considered herself to be the keeper of balance in the world, and while the rune possesses the power to take life, perhaps, if mastered, it may also potentially contain the power to grant life, not just to its bearer, but potentially to others. If so, this would upset the balance Leknath hopes to maintain, which would explain her insistence that the rune must never be used, although this is unconfirmed. The earliest recorded sighting we have of this rune was sometime around the solar year 150, in the stupidly named Village of the Hidden Rune, a secluded community whose purpose was to protect the rune and keep it hidden from the world. The rune was held by Ted's grandfather, but he would pass the rune over to Ted when Windy, along with Uber and Necklord, destroyed the village in pursuit of the rune. Ted would remain a child and didn't age while bearing the rune. He would spend the next 150 years wandering the world alone, and eventually, tired and worn down from the rune's curse, and the loneliness that came with it, Ted would encounter the mysterious Fogship Guide, a being from another world. The Fogship Guide offered to free Ted of his curse in exchange for the rune. Ted accepted this offer and spent several years on the ship, where he would finally begin aging thanks to no longer bearing the rune. Several years later, during a chance encounter with the bearer of the Rune of Punishment, Ted decided to leave the Fogship and return to the outside world. He would reclaim the Soul Eater from the Fogship Guide and would then use its power to aid Laszlo for the duration of the Island Liberation War. During the war, Ted would befriend Aldo, although it was reluctant to do so due to the rune's curse. After the war, Ted began wandering again. Aldo would follow after him and would die under mysterious circumstances shortly after, possibly having fallen victim to the Soul Eater's curse. Windy, still in pursuit of the rune after all these years, would eventually catch up to Ted. Ted, wounded during a confrontation with some of Windy's minions, and was found in a forest by some villagers from Moo Village. Ted would fall in love with the woman who nursed him back to health, and shortly after the two would marry. Ted spent the next 10 years in the village, before deciding to divorce her and leave the village as he continued not to age, remaining a teenager in appearance while she got older. Shortly after leaving the village, Ted learned that Moo Village had been attacked by Windy, with all of the villagers killed and all of their right hands chopped off, all in part of Windy's search for the rune that he bore. Devastated by the news, Ted would continue wandering the world alone. Eventually, he would be found by Tio MacDull, where he claimed to be a war orphan. Tio adopted him, and Ted became close friends with Tio's son, Tyr. 2 years later, we begin the events of Suikoden 1. Ted, along with Tyr, his group, and Kanan, would encounter a queen ant in Mount Seifu. To save the group, Ted would use the power of the Soul Eater against the queen ant, and upon returning to Gregminster, Kanan would report this event to Windy, and Windy would demand that Ted give her the Soul Eater. Ted used the power of the Soul Eater to escape, but was heavily wounded in the process. Ted would pass the rune to Tyr, apologizing for the curse it would bring him. Throughout the course of Suikoden 1, the Soul Eater would claim the souls of those closest to Tyr. It would claim the soul of Odessa, the woman who opened his eyes and set him on a new path in life. It would claim the soul of Gremio, his loyal guardian and protector, and it would also claim the soul of his father Tio. The rune would grow stronger with each soul it absorbed. Later in the events of the game, Tyr would encounter Ted, who was being mind-controlled by Windy's magic. Being in the presence of the Soul Eater gave Ted enough strength to temporarily break free of Windy's magic. Using this opportunity, Ted would command the Soul Eater to take his soul, a request that the Soul Eater obliged. At the end of the game, Windy would try to forcibly take the Soul Eater from Tyr, but the Soul Eater, with a will of its own, would reject her and choose to remain with Tyr. Following the events of Suikoden 1, Tyr would leave the country, choosing to wander out of fear and concern of what misfortune the rune might bring to those around him. Although he would be persuaded to use the rune's power once more when a young boy called Ko fell into danger. The spirits of those whose souls were absorbed by the Soul Eater appear to live on within it, leading to speculation that, while it may be able to take life, it may be able to grant life. although this is unconfirmed. The Rune of Life and Death is currently held by Tir Macdul. The Rune of Beginning. The Rune of Beginning represents sword and shield from the creation myth, and is believed to have been present at the beginning of the world. The rune is normally divided into two separate runes, the Bright Shield and Black Sword runes, which is how we find it during the events of Suikoden 2. Although true runes normally provide eternal youth through agelessness and immunity to disease, the Rune of Beginning does not do so while it's divided into two, and excessive use of their divided power can end up taking the life of its bearer. The two runes must be united through war to become whole again. The rune is said to appear at critical moments and wars in history, where it places the burden of destiny on two heroes who are bound by the rune's powers and fated to oppose one another, with the victor claiming his opponent's half and uniting the rune. One such event was in the solar year 428, where Han Cunningham and Genkaku, on opposing sides of a war between the Highland Kingdom and the city-states of Joustin, would each inherit a component of the rune. Genkaku and Han, who were childhood friends from the same village, realizing the dangers the rune possess, and growing tired of this pointless conflict, would seal the runes away in Toto Village. During the solar year 460, war would break out once again between the Highland Kingdom and the city-states of Joustin, with the runes once again influencing war in the area. Genkaku's adopted son and his best friend Joey would discover the runes in Toto Village, with Joey inheriting the Black Sword rune, and Ryu inheriting the Bright Shield rune. The two would eventually be pitted against one another on opposing sides of the war, just as Genkaku and Han were. Use of the runes throughout the war exhausted both Ryu and Joey, but it was Joey who was determined to create a lasting peace no matter the costs, who would risk his life through excessive use of his Black Sword rune to keep the power of the Beast rune from being fully unleashed. Following the war, Ryu and Joey would face off against each other in a final duel at Tenzan Pass. Joey, content to die to preserve the peace the two had fought for, and Ryu unwilling to fight his friend and would refuse to duel. Eventually, Joey would collapse from exhaustion due to his overuse of the Black Sword rune throughout the war. After Joey collapsed, he would beg and plead Ryu to kill him and unite the rune, but Ryu would refuse. Joey, on the verge of death, would be saved thanks to the power of friendship, the Rune of Beginning. The bond between Ryu and Joey, the strength of their friendship, would overcome the will of the Rune of Beginning, with both runes healing Joey from the brink of death. Although should you choose to fight this duel and kill Joey, Ryu will unite the two components into the Rune of Beginning. The rune, when whole, is said to possess the ability to judge war, although what exactly this means and what it does is unknown. It's presumed that the rune will grant its bearers the powers of the Black Sword rune and the Bright Shield rune when combined. The Black Sword rune holds powerful offensive magic, manifesting itself in the forms of swords and unleashing devastating powers, while the Bright Shield rune, on the other hand, focuses more on defensive and curative magic. It is rumoured that those who are close to the rune won't die, even should they suffer from wounds that would normally kill them. While the Black Sword rune is not known to have any child runes, the Bright Shield rune has a child rune called the Shield rune, and much like its parent, the Shield rune focuses more on curative powers. It's often incorrectly assumed by many that Sword represents chaos and Shield represents order. The reality is the opposite. The Suikoden 3 manga reveals that Sword represents order, while Shield represents chaos. The Beast rune. The Beast rune represents animalistic rage and passion. The rune has the ability to draw out raw power from within, to draw out the violent emotions and passions that dwell within all creatures and beings. After quelling the Harmonian Civil War, Marrow Blight was gifted the territory of High East as a reward, allowing him to establish the Highland Kingdom. Officially, the Beast rune is said to have been given to the Blight family by High Priest Hikusak as an additional gift, to represent their right to rule in the newly founded Highland Kingdom. However, the truth is that the Beast Rune refused to be contained within Harmonia and moved to Lorenwi of its own free will. Harmonia covered this up and claimed they gifted it to Marrow Blight, using the rune's movement as a political tool to strengthen their southern border and use the Highland Kingdom as a buffer. The Beast Rune would lay dormant within Lorenwi Palace until Luca Blight took interest in its powers 224 years later during the events of the Dunnan Unification War. Luca would realise the rune could be used as a weapon of war and offered a mass sacrifice to the rune by sacrificing the citizens of Muse to awaken the rune's power, summoning powerful golden wolves to attack the new state army. The rune would be resealed in Lorenwi Palace following Luca's death until the final moments of the Dunnan Unification War, where Leon would offer a blood sacrifice to the Beast Rune, where it would manifest itself as a giant two-headed silver wolf. The Beast Rune's whereabouts after its defeat is unknown. The Beast Rune's similarly named child rune, the Beast Rune, is a cursed rune that transforms its bearer into an animal, trapping the bearer in animal form and only allowing them to revert to human form for mere moments. The curse is temporarily broken on nights during full moons, allowing the bearer to return to human form for that night. There appears to be no known way to remove the rune once it attaches itself to someone, with Ernst, a victim of the rune's curse, seeking the aid of the powerful mage Levi to help him remove the rune. The Beast Rune being gifted to Highland is often incorrectly attributed to Sasori due to a mistranslation. The Beast Rune moved to Lorenwi in the solar year 236. However, Sasori wasn't born until the solar year 444, which is 208 years after this event happened. The Gate Rune. The Gate Rune possesses a great power. The rune grants its bearer the ability to open portals to other worlds, allowing the bearer to summon beings from those worlds, but also possessing the power to return those beings to their worlds. The Gate Rune was protected for centuries by the Clan of the Gate, or the Gate Rune clan if you prefer, until sometime around the solar year 70, when the clan was destroyed when they were attacked by the Holy Kingdom of Harmonia, who would slaughter all of the villagers in pursuit of the rune. During this attack, Windy and Leknat would split the Gate Rune in two halves and teleport away to prevent it from falling into Harmonian hands. Windy would take the front half of the rune, which granted her the ability to summon beings from other worlds, while Leknat would take the back half of the rune, allowing her to reverse such summons and return them to the worlds they came from. The Gate Rune remains unique in that, even when divided in two, the bearers of each half would gain the full benefits of a true rune, such as agelessness and immunity to disease. Leknat's back half of the rune, in combination with the 108 Stars of Destiny, was able to bring Gremio back to life. Leknat stated that this was a unique event and that it could only be done once. How this was possible, we don't know, as Gremio was eaten alive by man-eating spores, with no trace of his body remaining, and his soul was taken by the Soul Eater, ruling out resurrection. Although considering the power of the Gate Rune is opening portals between worlds, one might assume she pulled Gremio from an identical parallel world before his death, rather than pulling him from the past, as Gremio's soul remained in the Soul Eater at the end of Suikoden 1 after his revival. Although all of this is speculation. Windy would use her front half of the rune during the Gate Rune Wars to summon an army of 80,000 monsters to combat the Liberation Army in the final battle of the war. Although these monsters were returned to their original world, thanks to the combined effort of Leknat using her back half of the Gate Rune and Joshua Levenheit through the use of his Dragon Rune. The front half of the Gate Rune was last seen when Barbarossa leapt from the garden on the roof of Gregminster Palace with Windy in his arms in the final moments of the war. The current whereabouts of the front half of the rune remains a mystery. However, as neither Barbarossa nor Windy's bodies were recovered, some believe that Windy may still be alive and the rune is still in her possession. The back half of the rune remains in Leknat's possession. The Dragon Rune. The dragon rune is what allows dragons to exist in the Suikoden world. It is not known why dragons cannot survive in the world without the aid of the dragon rune, as they weren't created by the rune itself. Dragons are not native to the Suikoden world, but rather are from a world known as the world of wings and scales. Some dragons have been shown to have been able to create portals to their homeworld, although it is unknown if this is something that can be done freely, or if it is a rare event that can occur subconsciously when dragons are in great pain. Traditionally, the rune is held by the leader of the Dragon Knights. The captain of the Dragon Knights rarely changes, as the bearer of this rune holds great responsibility. The captain also rarely leaves the Dragon's Den and never takes to the front lines of battle, as the death of the captain would result in the death of all dragons in the world. The rune also allows its bearer control over dragons, although this requires strong willpower from its bearer, as dragons will refuse to obey and resist the commands of those who are mentally weak. Towards the end of the Gate Rune War, Joshua Levenheit would command the Dragon Rune to lend its power to Leknath, when she was sending monsters summoned by Windy back to their original world. Joshua Levenheit held the rune for over 200 years. Following the Gate Rune War, he would pass the rune over to Vice Commander Milia when she was promoted to Captain of the Dragon Knights. The rune remains in Milia's possession. The Sovereign Rune. The Sovereign Rune once belonged to the Holy Kingdom of Harmonia, and was protected within the holy city of Rupanda, which would later become known as Gregminster, when during the solar year 230, Pranak Rugnar would lead a bloodless coup and founded the Scarlet Moon Empire. Pranak Rugnar would claim the Sovereign Rune, and the rune remained a Rugnar family heirloom until the Empire's fall. The rune was embedded into the Dragon Kingsword, although it's unknown if this was the choice of the rune itself, or if the Rugnars themselves embedded the rune into their family sword. The Rugnars kept their ownership of the Sovereign Rune a secret, with only direct family members being aware of this secret, as evident by Windy not knowing of the rune's location until Barbarossa revealed it to her. The rune also allows its bearer to transform into a three-headed golden hydra, although while in this form, it doesn't provide immunity to magic, but instead resistance to magic. The current whereabouts of the rune following the Gate Rune War is unknown. It was last seen in possession of Barbarossa Rugnar when he leapt from his castle's balcony, although since his body was never recovered, it's assumed that he may still be alive, and that the rune may still be in his possession. The Night Rune. The Night Rune represents the power of the night, and allows creatures of the night, such as skeletons, zombies, and vampires to exist in the world, as well as possessing the power to kill them in cases where normal methods cannot. The Night Rune was originally intertwined or synchronized with the Sun Rune. The two runes held a strong bond, with the Sun Rune ruling over light and the Night Rune reigning over the darkness. Eventually, the Night Rune would become annoyed by the Sun Rune's dazzling brilliance, and would sever the bond between them. After this separation, the Night Rune chose to take the form of a sword, known as the Star Dragon Sword, or the Zodiac Sword, an attempt to hide its powers so that it can defeat vampires created by the Moon Rune, a rune that the Night Rune is said to hold strong influence over. Victor would encounter the Night Rune in the form of the Star Dragon Sword in the Cave of the Past, where the rune would transport him along with Tyr and Cleo 300 years into the past. Victor would then use the power of the sword to slay the immortal vampire Necklord. While in the form of a sword, the rune contains a face carved into its hilt. Thanks to this face, the Night Rune is able to verbally communicate with people. The Night Rune has been shown to be very prideful, bordering on egotistical, prone to nagging and often arguing with its bearer. This prideful, argumentative nature has resulted in physical confrontation, as Victor, a past bearer of the rune, would match the sword's energy and sassiness, which would cause the two to get on each other's nerves. Once angered, the sword would grow bigger and attempt to fight its bearer. Although this anger can be quickly sated with verbal praise and grovelling apologies. The sword was also quite large and heavy, making it unwieldy for most warriors. Victor would eventually grow tired of the sword and, looking for an excuse to get rid of it, would pass it off to Edge, a young man he encountered on his travels, who was on a quest to defeat a vampire that kidnapped his sister. Following the events of Suikoden 3, the Night Rune is still in possession of Edge, and they were last seen heading south of the grasslands to defeat an unknown enemy sought after by the Star Dragon Sword. The Sun Rune. The Sun Rune is one of the 3 treasures of the Queendom of Falena. The rune governs over the great power of the sun, and is capable of nurturing life, possessing the ability to restore desolate wastelands back into fertile lands full of life. But it is also capable of devastating destruction, possessing the ability to turn fertile lands into barren wastelands. The Sun Rune was originally intertwined with the Night Rune, and the two lived in harmony. The runes were eventually split after the Night Rune severed the bond between them after growing annoyed by its light. Following the split, and the balance between light and darkness disrupted, the Sun Rune would become unstable and lean towards its more destructive nature, leaving those who bear it to become mentally unstable. Without the Night Rune to keep the Sun Rune's impulses in check, the Sun Rune would instill a sense of righteousness in its bearer, a sense of always being in the right and everyone else always being wrong, leading to those who bear it to being prone to impulsive outbursts of near uncontrollable anger. We have seen cases of this where the Sun Rune would cause the king of the ancient Arma's kingdom to go insane. He would then use the Sun Rune to destroy much of the southern continent, scorching the land and turning it into a barren wasteland, destroying his entire kingdom overnight. And we have seen cases of its nurturing powers, when the Sindar would eventually use the Sun Rune to restore life to the lands of the southern continent. When the Night Rune and Sun Rune split, the fragments of their bond would remain behind and become the Dawn Rune and the Twilight Rune, in essence, the children of the Sun and Night Runes. Without the Night Rune to keep the balance and tame the Sun Rune's destructive powers, the Dawn and Twilight Runes could be used to keep the balance and calm the Sun Rune down, keeping it under control. But when that balance is upset, the Sun Rune's destructive powers are unleashed. We saw this during Suikoden 5 when the Dawn Rune was stolen from the Eastern Palace. Queen Ashtat would bear the Sun Rune, and due to the rune's influence, she would become more violent and unstable, prone to outbursts of great anger when questioned or challenged. In response to the theft of the Dawn Rune from the Eastern Palace, Ashtat would unleash the power of the Sun Rune on the town of Lord Lake, drying up the lake and starving the land, turning it into a barren wasteland. Ashtat began suffering the same mental insanity that the king of the ancient Arma's kingdom was suffering from, but her husband Ferid was able to pull her out of these fits and calm her down. Ashtat would eventually lose total control of the rune and would accidentally use the rune's power to kill Ferid. Upon realizing what she had done, she would temporarily burst into tears, before her emotions, in tune with the rune's destructive nature, would cause her to go completely insane, attempting to unleash the full power of the rune and threatening to destroy the whole nation, the same way the ancient Arma's king did. She would be slain by the swordsman George Prime before she could unleash this power. Following her death, the rune would seal itself in a bust within the palace. Given the fickle nature of the rune, it would only allow select people to bear it, as even Ashtat's daughter Limslea was rejected by the rune. During the Sun Rune War, the rune would influence the Godwinds into believing their cause was just and righteous, showing that the rune's influences and powers don't just affect those who bear it, but can also even extend to those in its presence. The Sun Rune has been shown to be able to manifest itself into a giant moth. This rune is not currently possessed by any character, it resides dormant in a bust in the Sun Palace in Falena. Its powers kept in check and the balance maintained by its child runes, the Dawn and Twilight runes. The Moon Rune. The Moon Rune is said to represent both compassion and destruction. The rune comes with a great curse. Not only does it transform its bearer into a vampire, it also dominates its bearer's mind, causing them to go on a bloodthirsty killing spree to sate their vampiric urges, until such a time when the bearer finally gains mastery over the rune. The first known bearer of the Moon Rune is Sierra McCain. who first came into contact with the rune around 800 to 850 years ago. Upon coming into possession of the rune, she would be transformed into a vampire and would go on a killing spree. Resisting the curse, she would run away and isolate herself in a forest until she gained mastery over the rune, unlocking its powers of compassion. No longer having a desire to kill, and with her vampiric urges now diminished, no longer requiring to drink the blood of the living, Sierra would create the Blue Moon Village, a safe haven for vampires who wish to live peacefully and cast away their dark pasts. She would place the moon rune on an altar in the center of the village, allowing its compassionate effects to negate the vampiric urges of her fellow vampires. However, one of the villagers, Necklord, who was overtaken by his lust for power, would steal the moon rune before fleeing the village, forcing the villagers to either choose between starving to death or returning to their old ways, killing and feeding off of the blood of humans to sustain themselves. Sierra would spend the next nearly 400 years in pursuit of Necklord and hunting all vampires who chose to return to feeding on humans, before finally encountering Necklord in Tinto City during the events of the Dunnan Unification War. Necklord was trying to ritualistically sacrifice the lives of 100 innocent people to awaken an unknown power within the rune. Sierra would catch up to Necklord just in time, and despite no longer being in physical possession of the moon rune, the rune still recognized her as its rightful master, obeying her commands, deactivating itself and putting an end to the ritual. After defeating Necklord in battle, Sierra would reclaim the moon rune, and to this day it remains in her possession. The Circle Rune. The Circle Rune is a symbol of balance. It represents both order and stagnation. The rune is borne by Hikusak, the High Priest of Harmonia, and has been in his possession for close to 500 years. Almost nothing is known about the rune or its bearer, and nothing is known about the specific abilities of the rune, although it is said to hold great power. It's said that the Holy Kingdom of Harmonia is named after the rune's power of bringing both peace and harmony. But with the rune also representing stagnation, that peace and harmony comes at the cost of stalling progress. Rumours of Hikusak's death in the solar year 230 led to civil war within Harmonia, and he apparently hasn't been seen in public since. Although Luke and Sasurai, who are clones of Hikusak, were made as recently as the solar year 444, which would suggest that he is in fact still alive and still in possession of the Circle Rune. The True Wind Rune. One of the 5 runes that govern the elements. The True Wind Rune, as the name implies, governs the power of the wind. The rune was once owned by the Holy Kingdom of Harmonia, and the only known bearer of this rune is Luke. Luke was a clone of Hikusak, the High Priest of Harmonia. Luke was considered to be a failed and defective clone, as the True Wind Rune would become intertwined with his very soul. Because of this, Luke would be confined to the one temple in Harmonia, being used merely as a storage device to hold the true rune. When he was 5 years old, Leknot would take pity on Luke's circumstances and rescue him from the temple, taking him to Magician's Isle and taking him on as her apprentice. The True Wind Rune granted Luke the ability to teleport, and during the events of Suikoden 1, Luke would use the True Wind Rune to summon a golem to face off against Tyr. While in Suikoden 2, Luke would unleash the power of the True Wind Rune to decimate the army of his brother Sasurai. Thanks to the strong bond between Luke and his True Wind Rune, due to it being intertwined with his very soul, the True Wind Rune would begin revealing visions of a potential future to Luke. Visions of a greyed out world with no sound, no wind, no colour, a lifeless world of perfect order. Luke was able to share these visions with the bearer of the True Fire Rune by projecting them into the mind of the bearer of the True Fire Rune. Luke would attempt to perform a ritual to destroy the True Wind Rune that he possessed, in an attempt to save the world from this potential future. The True Wind Rune is capable of manifesting itself into a giant bird. The whereabouts and status of the True Wind Rune are unknown following the events of Suikoden 3. The True Earth Rune. The True Earth Rune is one of the 5 elemental runes, and it governs the power of the earth. Very little is known about the rune itself, although earth magic is primarily known for its defensive and protective abilities. The rune is currently held by Sasarai, a bishop within the Holy Kingdom of Harmonia. Much like Luke's birth, Sasarai is a clone of Hikusak created for the purpose of being a vessel for the true runes. We first see this rune during the events of Suikoden 2, where Sasarai would protect himself from Luke unleashing the true wind rune's power during battle. We next see the true earth rune during the events of Suikoden 3, where Luke would steal Sasarai's true earth rune in an attempt to perform a ritual to destroy his own true wind rune. The ritual was unsuccessful and Sasarai would recover his true earth rune. The rune remains in his possession. The true fire rune. The true fire rune is one of the 5 elemental runes and it governs the power of fire. As with all of the elemental runes, very little is known about the rune itself, although fire is shown to have devastating power. The rune once belonged to the Holy Kingdom of Harmonia, but it would be stolen from them around the solar year 425 by the Firebringer, where the rune would be borne by the Flame Champion who would use the rune's power to defend the grasslands from Harmonian invasion. In the final battle of the war, the rune's destructive powers would be revealed. The Flame Champion would lose control of the rune, killing both friend and foe alike, decimating both forces and ending the war. Following the war, the Flame Champion would use an ancient Sindar technique to forcibly remove the rune from his body. 50 years later, during the events of Suikoden 3, Hugo would inherit the true fire rune and become the new Flame Champion, wielding its power to protect the Grasslanders from a new threat. The rune would be stolen by Luke in an attempt to perform a ritual to destroy his own true wind rune. But the ritual was unsuccessful and the rune would be reclaimed by Hugo. While it is possible to choose Hugo, Chris or Gedo to be the Flame Champion, according to lore, it is Hugo who takes on the mantle and bears the true fire rune. The True Lightning Rune. The True Lightning Rune is one of the 5 elemental true runes and governs the power of lightning. As is the case with the elemental runes, very little is known about the rune itself, although lightning-based magic focuses primarily on offensive magic. The True Lightning Rune is borne by Gedo, captain of the 12th unit of the Harmonian Southern Frontier Defense Force. There are 2 conflicting stories about how Gedo came into possession of this rune. The first is that the rune was a treasure of a nation that was destroyed by Harmonia, but that Gedo would manage to escape with the rune and keep it out of Harmonian hands. The other story is that 20 years before the Firebringer War, which is 70 years before the events of Suikoden 3, Gedo would be involved in some sort of tragedy in the grasslands near the Karayan village. A tragedy that caused him to lose his right eye and inherit the True Lightning Rune. An event that caused him to consider the rune and land to be cursed. Which is true? I lean more towards the latter as it falls in line with the events and dialogue of Suikoden 3. Gedo would keep his True Lightning Rune hidden, although he would wield the power of the True Lightning Rune to help the Firebringer fight Harmonia, before once again choosing to keep the rune hidden, until finally, 50 years later, choosing to wield the power once again to aid the Grasslanders in the Second Firebringer War. During the Second Firebringer War, or the War of Champions if you prefer, Luke would steal the True Lightning Rune from Gedo and attempt to use it in a ritual to destroy his own True Wind Rune, but the ritual was unsuccessful and Gedo would reclaim the rune. It is possible for Hugo to be the one who possesses the True Lightning Rune if you choose Gedo as the Flame Champion, although lore-wise it is Gedo who retains possession of the True Lightning Rune. The True Water Rune. The True Water Rune is one of the 5 elemental runes and it governs the power of water. Very little is known about the rune itself, although water-based magic focuses primarily on protective and healing spells. Just like the True Fire Rune, it was once in the possession of the Holy Kingdom of Harmonia until it was stolen by the Firebringer and inherited by Wyatt Lightfellow. Wyatt would wield the power of the True Water Rune to protect the grasslands from Harmonian invasion. After the war, he would settle down in Zexen and get married. In the years following the birth of his daughter, Chris Lightfellow, the Howling Vice Guild, a Harmonian organization known for carrying out anything from trivial escort missions right up to espionage and assassinations, would discover Wyatt's whereabouts and attempted to hunt him down in an attempt to recover the rune. To spare his family, Wyatt would flee Zexen and seal his rune away in Sindar runes in the grasslands, before taking on the identity of Jimba and living amongst the Karians. During the events of Suikoden 3, the rune would become unsealed, and rather than allowing the rune to fall into the wrong hands, Wyatt would unleash the rune's power, causing it to go out of control. His daughter Chris would arrive, and thanks to her father's bond with the rune, she was able to calm and take possession of it. The rune would eventually be stolen by Luke to use in a ritual to destroy his own true wind rune. The ritual was unsuccessful and Chris would reclaim the rune. While it is possible for Hugo to be the one who possesses the true water rune, should you choose Chris as the flame champion, lore-wise it is Chris who possesses the true water rune. The Rune of Change. The Rune of Change represents constant change. Both the powers of this rune and its whereabouts are a total mystery. We never encounter or see this rune in any of the games or source material. Everything we know about this rune comes from Old Book Volume 2 in Suikoden 2. According to the legend in this book, the rune was born by the leader of the Sindar people, and granted them eternal life, but cursed them, dooming them to a life of eternal wandering. Because of this curse, the Sindar were unable to settle and inhabit a single area for too long. The ruined remains of many of their constructions still dot the landscape to this very day, from the northern continent to the southern continent, a testament to their advanced construction techniques. The legend of the Sindar and the Rune of Change ends with the Sindar arriving at the Eternal City, ending their curse of eternal wandering. The whereabouts of the rune and its current bearer are a total mystery. Is it still in the possession of the Sindar leader? Is the tale of the Sindar arriving at the Eternal City and ending their curse even real? These events were so long ago that no one living today remembers the details or the truth surrounding either the rune or the story of the Sindar themselves. The Rune of Punishment. The Rune of Punishment represents atonement and forgiveness. It is considered to be one of the cursed true runes, as while it grants its host great power, it drains the life of its host in exchange. This rune has killed countless hosts in short periods of time, and none held the rune for very long before succumbing to the curse and losing their lives. Once the host's life has been drained by the rune, their body turns to ash and their soul is absorbed into the rune, with their memories living on within it, and then the rune will transfer itself into the nearest available host. The rune was sealed away in the ruins of Obel for many years after its last bearer died, and with no host within range for the rune to transfer itself to, it remained buried within the ruins, until it was released by the Queen of Obel in an attempt to prevent a pirate attack on the Kingdom of Obel. She would resist using the rune until her children were threatened, unleashing its power and destroying the pirates. Her son would be thrown overboard and lost at sea during the conflict, and the Queen would succumb to the rune's curse and lose her life shortly after. Over the next several years, the rune would jump from host to host, spreading its curse and claiming the lives of Rockji's father, Graham Cray's son, pirates Steele and Brando, before finally ending up in the possession of Glen Cott. The only known person to survive the rune's curse was Graham Cray. It transferred itself into Graham, and Graham would chop his hand off to rid himself of the rune. With the exception of Graham Cray, all known previous bearers were killed by the rune. Before the rune passed from the pirate Brando to Glen Cott, Brando would attempt to use the rune to kill Laszlo, but the rune would have no effect on Laszlo, as he appeared to have been protected by the rune itself. Laszlo being the lost son of the long-dead Queen of Obel, a former bearer of the true rune. Why the rune protected Laszlo is unknown. Could the rune sense Laszlo was the child of a past bearer and therefore would become a worthy bearer in the future? But despite the rune protecting Laszlo, the rune would choose to transfer itself into Glen Cott, who arrived shortly after. Glen would succumb to the rune's curse, using its power to repel a pirate attack on Razrul, losing his life in the process. The rune would transfer to Laszlo, who would then be accused of murdering Glen. Laszlo would wield the rune's powers to protect the island nations from the invading Kuluk Empire. While it is believed that the Rune of Punishment offers the same benefits as other true runes, such as agelessness and immunity to disease, none of its previous bearers lived long enough to find out. Until Laszlo. Laszlo was able to unlock the rune's forgiveness phase due to his forgiving nature, breaking the curse and causing the rune to no longer drain the life of its host. Thanks to this phase, it is presumed that Laszlo has now gained the full benefit of the true runes, such as agelessness and immunity to disease. Laszlo's whereabouts are unknown as he hasn't been seen in 166 years, presumably choosing to isolate himself on the deserted island in the island nations, fearing that, should he die, his death would begin the cycle of death and destruction all over again. And finally, we have the Eightfold Rune. The Eightfold Rune, or the Eighth Section Rune if you prefer. The nature of this rune is a complete mystery and its powers are unknown. It is speculated that the rune is based on the 8 virtues of Confucianism: filial piety, brotherhood, loyalty, trustworthiness, etiquette, righteousness, integrity, and shamefulness, although how that would transfer into rune powers is unknown. The rune is currently possessed by Uber, a man or demon who violently hates true runes and considers them a curse. A man who is the opposite of those 8 virtues. Although we have seen cases where the bearer of a rune needs to meet certain requirements to reach the next phase of the rune and unlock its true potential, as was explained earlier with the Rune of Punishment. This could also be true for the 8th Section Rune, where its bearer may be required to prove themselves worthy by adhering to the 8 virtues to unlock its full potential. Although this is all speculation as the nature of the rune is completely unknown. Uber also possessed a unique and similarly named rune called the 8 Devil Rune, a rune that allowed him to split his body into 3 and deal extraordinary damage. This could be a child rune of the 8th Section Rune, although that is also unconfirmed, continuing the mysterious and unknown nature of the rune. Those 18 runes are the only true runes that we currently know of. The remaining 9 runes are a complete mystery to us with no details known about them, not even their names. This final part is just my opinion on some details, but I find the Sun rune to have the most interesting story, and it's probably my favourite story surrounding the true runes. It's a story of a messy divorce. The Sun rune, hurt, bitter and angry over its long-term partner, abruptly ending their relationship out of nowhere, choosing to sever their bond and leaving. Now the Sun rune, leaning into those negative emotions of bitterness and angriness, wanting everyone else to know their pain, only being kept in check by the love of its children. When the Dawn rune was stolen during the Lord Lake uprising, did Arshtat lose control and unleash the power of the rune on the town because the balance was upset and she was being influenced by the rune, causing her to become mentally unstable? Or did the Sun rune lose control because it became angry over the abduction of its child? Did Arshtat's mental well-being deteriorate because the balance was no longer being kept? Or was it caused by the Sun rune's anger and anxiety, the worry over the fate and whereabouts of its child, the Dawn rune? And then you have the Star rune, a child rune of the Night rune, but with no connection to the Sun rune, which was able to quell the powers of the Twilight rune when an unworthy bearer was losing control. And take the Gate rune. After Windy's presumed but unconfirmed death, why did her front half of the rune not find Leknat and reunite with the back half? Can the rune not be united and made whole again? Is the separation permanent? Or perhaps, due to the bond that formed between them and their halves of the runes over the years, the runes are now at odds, just like Windy and Leknat were, and perhaps the two halves refuse to unite. There are even cases of children of true rune bearers holding connections to the runes their parents bore. Chris in Suikoden 3, even if chosen as the flame champion to bear the true fire rune, holds a connection to the true water rune, which was borne by her father Wyatt, and is able to calm its power when it's going out of control. Laszlo in Suikoden 4 is protected by the Rune of Punishment when it's used against him, which was once held by his mother. Are these acts of loyalty by the true runes to protect the children of past bearers they formed a bond with? Or were the runes influenced by the memories of their past bearers that are retained within them? The mysteries surrounding the nature of the runes are fascinating. Do you have any theories or thoughts surrounding the true runes? Which is your favourite? What true rune do you hold a soft spot for? If you could bear one of the 27 true runes, which one would you choose? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.